Hi everyone, and thanks for being with me again. I'm going to have I'm going to start by talking about a pet concern I have, something that has just arisen in the last few days, which kind of really pisses me off, and that is that for a long time now I've subscribed to certain YouTube channels, some podcasts that I find interesting, fascinating, at the same, they talk about the same topics that I'm interested in. I learn a lot from them. They're fabulous. Become sort of a part of my life, if you like. And then I discovered that the number of podcasts seemed to have dropped off because they started doing the members only thing on YouTube, which means that you have to pay $5 or $6 per month to watch their content. Now, I didn't find them exciting enough to have to pay. By the time I pay for my streaming services and a whole host of other stuff, I pay enough. I don't want to have to pay for other services on YouTube, on over the internet, particularly when I seem to be paying heaps for streaming services and everything else. So I got really pissed off, and I started to think, well, some of these people. One of them was Anthony Scaramucci. Now Anthony's a multi-millionaire, and I'm just wondering why in the hell do you need to charge people to watch you and Katie crap on about Donald Trump forever? I don't understand it. It's just, um, why are you so greedy? I have vowed and declared I will never, no matter how many distributors, how many subscriptions I have, I will never charge people to watch my videos. Firstly, I don't think I'm that important. And secondly, I think there's something amoral around it. And I notice, I don't think Midas Touch have a members only section either. And why do you make it so exclusive? Like, what's that all about? And it just seems to me it's just about arrogance and hubris, and it's just bullshit, frankly. So that's my gripe. I don't know if any of you have noticed that as well, that there are a lot of people now going to members only. I qualify, but don't want to do that because that's not what this is about for me. This is about you and I having a conversation, having a community in which we can talk about stuff that matters to all of us. So one of the stuffs that I want to talk about today is my favourite stuff, which is Andrew Bolt. I know as soon as I mention Andrew's name, people will be going, "Oh, here we go again." And but this is about a continual theme that is Bolt's, which refers very strongly, I think, to Bolt's version of race. Now, Andrew Andrew would love to live in a country, and perhaps we should argue that Andrew should go back to the country that he came from, which I think was the Netherlands, or his family did, because he's clearly unhappy living in a society which is not only multicultural but has its own indigenous population. This distresses Andrew incredibly because it seems to me that he focused on how much money is being spent in assisting First Nations people. Now, he has this most bizarre segue into this topic in the video I'm about to show you. So I'll show the beginning of the video, and then he goes into a whole lot of stuff around around First Nations people and stolen generation in particular. And so as he does that, we'll talk about that as he goes through that. But it was just interesting the way he approaches this because it seems totally unnecessary. But do watch out for the racist tropes that he espouses because they are, I think they're kind of profane. But let me know what you
To
think.
news today that proves how little facts count in politics. It's discussing how easily your money slips through the fingers of our politicians. Like this story today in the Daily Telegraph. It should be a national scandal, really. Nearly $2 billion.
Is leading to telling you all a story about the amount of money spent on retribution to First Nations people in WA. That's kind of where all of this is leading. It's a bizarre intro, but nevertheless, that's it.
$1 million gone, stolen. More than 100 people convicted for a rort that many were taught on TikTok, claiming fake expenses and business activity statements offered for fake companies, claiming fake GST refunds. Now, this guy, Christopher Andre Yuns, a gambler, he took $2.4 million of our money. This woman, Lily McKenzie, got $147,000. This bloke, Joshua Merritt, $395,000. And we're told that of the $2 billion stolen, less than 1/10 has been recovered. And this is why you pay your taxes. Now, I wonder how we managed to breed so many people.
I just thought, at this particular point in time, I thought I used to have this little ticker that when Paul Murray came on, it reminded everybody that Paul Murray is worth $4 million. And I don't know how much Andrew Bolt, I should look him up. I don't know how much Andrew Bolt is worth, but at this particular point, I'd like to put up how much Andrew is worth, because he seems to be, so these people have fraudulently acquired this money, and so they should be prosecuted. Don't have an issue with any of that. But then I think, to some extent, Andrew has fraudulently arrived at whatever his income is as well, in a more bizarre way, but still probably a little bit fraudulent.
With no shame at all about stealing from the rest of us. But to another example of your money not just being thrown away, but thrown away on something that actually puts children in danger. The West Australian Premier, Roger Cook, was today the latest Premier to say, I'm going to give money to my state's stolen generations. I'm going to give every one of them $85,000. He claimed a third of Aboriginal children in the past were stolen from their parents, and that past was shameful. So this is the stolen generations. And I say to Premier Cook, really? Really? Roger, I'm asking you, what stolen generations?
Here we go. So this is, so what, sit back, because this is where Andrew Bolt endeavours to justify the notion that there is no, so this is gaslighting at its worst. So Bolt is trying to convince you and I that there's no such thing as a stolen generation. So in order to do this, which is what gaslighters and bullies do, he wants to cite some people who declared, well, they're definitely Aboriginal, but he wants to talk about these people who have said that they were from the stolen generation, but apparently, according to him, there's evidence to prove that they were given to the missions. They were given out to be adopted by their parents, whatever. This is his argument. Now, to me, this is the height of arrogance, because you can't take just a few people and present this as your total argument, because there are tens of thousands of people who have had the experience of being stolen, taken away from their parents, simply because they were Indigenous. And there was an effort, unquestionable effort, in this country. This is the worst part of our history, or part of the worst part of our history, is that the white people in this country at the time believed that the Aboriginal people were subhuman, and that the children needed to be removed from those terrible black people and to be placed with white people, Christians generally, missions in particular, and so that they could be transformed into real human beings. This is what this is about. So this man would have fitted nicely in the 1920s. Andrew Bolt would have been ideal as one of those officers who goes around the place with a group of other officers rounding up black kids. He would have loved it, because this is who he is. So let's watch how he cares to gaslight us around this particular issue.
Who exactly are you giving this taxpayer money? The stolen generations actually means children stolen from their parents just because they were Aboriginal. Not because they were in danger, but just to destroy the Aboriginal race. Now, I've covered this story.
Isn't it great? At least he got that bit right. but it's said with sarcasm.
For decades, and right from the start saw a problem with it: the facts. And that phrase, stolen generations, was invented by Professor Peter Reid more than 40 years ago. And he singled out two examples of these stolen generations: Aloysius O'Donoghue, who became a top public servant and patron of the Sorry Day Committee, and Charles Perkins, who became the first Aborigine to head a Commonwealth Government department. Not a man easy to call a victim. Thing is, neither O'Donoghue nor Perkins were actually stolen. O'Donoghue later told me her white father had cruelly dumped her with missionaries. And Perkins admitted on 3AW radio he wasn't stolen either. His mother had actually asked the missionary, Percy Smith, to take and educate her very talented son. Now, every time I check this...
So just watch this. This is important to acknowledge that Bolt takes two successful individuals who are Indigenous and declares that because they're clever, because they were smart, then this is the reason why they've been able to be successful, because they were probably taken away knowing that they were smart and placed into other homes, white homes, where they were given the opportunity that they wouldn't have had they been in black communities. This is the trope, and this is the argument that he puts forward, which is a strong indicator of his degree of racism.
Stories of people claiming they were stolen has been much the same. Like in the first big federal test case for compensation for the stolen generations up in the Northern Territory for Peter Gunner and Lorna Kabilo. Well, the judge turned them down. Turned out Gunner had actually been sent by his mother to school at Alice Springs. Kabilo had been just 8 when she was rescued from a bush camp because her white father had vanished, her mother and grandmother had died, and the aunt who was supposedly looking after her often worked at a station more than 60 kilometres away.
There were many policies in Queensland and New South Wales. I'm not going to argue about what they were in WA. And there were certainly some in South Australia, even though I know of some horrible things that were done to Aboriginal people, providing mattresses that were full of some sort of concocted disease that would have wiped them out. That happened in WA. There were lots of efforts to eradicate Indigenous people, just generally speaking, forget about them being stolen. The fact that something was not necessarily written down, and I'm not going to argue that one way or the other, but the intention, we've got to remember we had a white Australia policy up until 1966, for Christ's sake. The efforts to keep Australia white was a policy. The efforts to assimilate Indigenous people in the way they did was a policy, whether it was written down or not, but it was an enacted activity. And there are many Aboriginal people who will talk about their parents and how they were stolen and why they were stolen, and they were rounded up, there's that wonderful movie, The Rabbit-Proof Fence, which talks about that. Bolt has argued that was fiction as well. So Bolt will find an argument, no matter what it is, that will determine from his perspective that Aboriginal children were not stolen. However, regardless of whether there's a policy or not, there are many, many thousands of Indigenous people who can tell the stories, their own stories, and particularly the stories of their parents of being stolen. You don't need necessarily a written piece of legislation that says this is what we're going to do. It is the attitude, it is the beliefs, it is the way governments chose to operate that determined whether or not kids are taken away, as it is today. And I know from my own personal experience working in the child protection system that Indigenous people are focused on, and their kids are taken at a greater rate than white kids who are in a similar situation. So the stuff that Andrew Bolt talks about is bullshit, and we must call it out for what it is, because this is about this man trying to gaslight his audience, and it's about him trying to convince us, trying to convince white people that they are superior, that they are better than our First Nations people, Indigenous people. So let's just keep all of that in mind. Let me know what you think. Remember to subscribe to my channel, ring the bell for further notifications, do what you need to do. In the meantime, take care, look after yourselves, and more importantly, be safe.